Howdy, y'all. We'll use our Texas welcome today. Howdy, y'all,
Sir.
to another episode of the Polynesianized podcast. This is a Sabbath live digital kava session. So we're going to be focusing on some religious topics today. How are you, Masi? And how is the beginning of the week for you in Aotearoa?
Good day so far today. It's people living in the Auckland region. We are on holiday here in New Zealand.
Oh,
They call it Auckland anniversary, which is
for the
like
city.
just
So is it like a city holiday or a
city region kind of thing.
country?
Yeah,
Hmm.
nope, just the Auckland. So people in Wellington and people in Christchurch or in the South Island, they still continue with their work, but it's just a city thing. So yeah, it's just the
Hey.
Aucklanders having a day off today. So so far so
Is it
good.
like
Can't
what's the
complain having the
purpose?
day off.
What's the purpose? Is it just hey,
This is just Auckland's day, I guess, remembering
hey,
the
Flag Day for
creation of
Auckland?
remembering I guess the creation of Auckland City, and they call it a day off. So yeah, it's a day off here for the Aucklanders.
Awesome. I do wanna point out to all of the viewers and the listeners, this was not by design, but today we are
Bucky's,
wearing Buckies. You
which is
know
a big deal in the state of
the
Texas.
Texas phenomenon that's taking over. I mean, I now go up to like the Midwest and everybody's talking about Buckies up there. They're building Buckies all over the place.
I I feel like it's been a trend the last 2 years, right? That Bucky's kind of
Yeah,
spreading its wings outside of the state, going into Colorado, going
exactly. Lee
entering
and
November.
Aaron have been to the one in Colorado. So, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, if you guys aren't familiar with it, on one of our podcasts, we talked about it. It is basically a gas station on steroids. Um, and actually, Masi, I saw on the headlines, Bucky's is suing another gas station because their logo was a little too similar to Bucky's. But just for those who are not familiar, I mean, even people outside of Texas aren't familiar with Bucky's. These are, hundreds of pumps and no semi trucks allowed. So it's not like a travel center for semi
yeah,
trucks.
not like a
It's
truck
just
stop.
for,
Regular
average
folks.
travelers. Hundreds of gas pumps, bigger than some grocery stores and about the size of some Walmarts, all a gas station. You can get barbecue, you can get grilling, hunting, you can get all kinds of snacks in these
Clothes,
Bucky stores, clothes,
batteries,
everything.
merchandise. Yeah,
So when
everything.
Masi visited with Sarah, we actually went to the original Bucky's,
Yeah.
and then we went to some larger ones. The original one wasn't as big as some of these other ones, but we thought that was kind of funny. Masi was like, "Hey, Tua, are you wearing your Bucky's shirt?" And I was like, "Yes, sir." And he's wearing his.
Yes. And and Bucky's, they go by the number, right? So this is Bucky's number one. They go by Bucky's
Yeah,
number two, right? For depending on what
for each
number you
store.
were you were like, I guess, billed on, right? For each store. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. Another quick before we get, let's get all the temporal stuff out. The Chiefs just beat the Bills, so that was a very close game. The Eagles smashed
Yeah.
the
Washington.
Commanders, and I was kind of bummed. I mean, I was good for either one. I do like, Jordan Mailata is on the Eagles. You also have Marcus Mariota on the Commanders, so I was kind of
Oh,
like,
I
I'll
forgot
be
about
good,
that. Oh, I forgot about he.
So, but it's all good, all good.
Well,
But
go by
yeah,
that. Who you picking in the Super Bowl? This is a repeat match.
ah,
This is the Eagles versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Who you going with?
it's if I were to think logically, just my mind, it's hard to go against the Chiefs right now just because they've delivered so many times. This team's been together, head coach, owner,
Hmm.
quarterback, many of the weapons on offense. The defense seems to be doing well.
Yeah.
But to see Jalen Hurts, people wrote him off. I want to see Jordan Mailata do well, right? And then also Saquon Barkley, right?
Hmm.
The Giants kind of wrote him off, but it looks like he's having a phenomenal year. So if I had to choose, I go a little bit more with my heart in these things, and I'm going to lean towards the Eagles, but I'd be fine if the Chiefs won, right? We got Schuster, like you mentioned when we were talking earlier, Andy Reid from BYU. So
Tua Mataya, he's another
Yeah,
one. I think
Polynesian.
he started left tackle, but I think he's second string or something happened. So yeah.
Yeah, but the point is, even like he'll get a ring, right? He'll get a ring, he'll get a bonus, and we want to see all of our Polynesians, brothers and sisters. Hey, Tavi says Eagles. We know where Tavi stands on that,
Ooh,
so he's
ooh,
going
ooh.
Eagles all day.
Okay. I'm leaning towards KC. I want KC to be the first team, first team to win 3 consecutive Super Bowls, unheard of in the NFL. So it's pretty
Okay,
nuts.
all right. So since it's the Sabbath and we've kind of fallen behind on some series, we finally caught up with the William Mariner
Yeah.
series. Another one of our series is the creation, being the Sabbath here in the United States. Um, we thought we'd do a religious episode for today on the live digital kava session. So the overall theme will be the creation account. We're going to continue with the creation account on day 2. We finished day 1. We'll do a summary to catch everyone up on where we were on the other episodes. And then we'll get into day 2. But we're going to go through some videos before we get to that. And a lot of them have to do with Alex O'Connor, a very influential atheist right now. Actually, he now says he's more agnostic than atheist, but he's still kind of, he's not as hardcore. We're gonna watch a couple of videos of him kind of speaking and in relation to the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, which kind of surprised some people. But that sounds like you're somewhat familiar with Alex O'Connor, Masi.
Yes. He's kind of a very I think we did like episode that had him kind of debating with a Catholic, I believe, person, and he sounds like a very well-known person that has good intention of just trying to defend why there's no God, right? Because things
Yeah.
don't make sense, and he sounds like, and he's not one of those people that's kind of just very like just very rude or in a way that he doesn't give good arguments. He does give some sound arguments, believing what he believes, that there is really no God, that this is just life, and we just kind of live in a world that's kind of man created kind of for us, and that's it, because a lot of things don't make sense. So he provides some good some arguments regarding that. But yeah, I've heard of him a lot.
And have you heard, and let me pull up have you heard of Ruslan before,
No,
Masi? This guy
no,
right here.
no, no, I haven't.
So, okay. So this guy is a Christian content creator. He usually mocks people like you and me for our religious beliefs in the restored gospel, even saying that we're not Christians,
Mm,
even though literally the name of the church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which I find ironic.
mhm.
But there was some drama, and I don't know if you're aware of it, Masi, between this guy named Billy Carson, Wes Huff, and Billy Carson was a atheist, anti-religion. Wes Huff is like not an Orthodox, a Pentecostal kind of
Okay.
Christian. And they had a debate, and I guess the atheist guy kind of got smashed a little bit. So he tried to sue the people who did the podcast, tried to stop the podcast from going out, and it really went bad for him. Even it was all over the internet, even to the point that Wes Huff got on the Joe Rogan podcast and talked about that a little bit and
Mm,
talked about Christianity. That guy, Wes Huff, even talks about the Mormons. I mean, the LDS people saying that they're, a little confused and how Joseph
mm,
Smith was a con artist, blah, 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 all your stereotypical stuff. But he also said some things that were incorrect.
yeah.
And Alex O'Connor called him out on it and called out a bunch of other Christians for trying to defend him and not just saying, hey guys, he made a mistake, he was wrong, but instead try to soften it. That's why as you can see, the title of this Alex O'Connor confronts me on defending Wes Huff. Because
Okay.
what happened was, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there is a section of the scrolls that is on Isaiah.
Yeah.
And Wes Huff told Joe Rogan that it was word for word the same. and it is not. There are lots of words that are not the same. And not only that, I think there's a couple verses, 1 or 2 verses that are not in there, that are different from the Isaiah scriptures that we have in the canonized options. So this whole episode was Alex O'Connor calling them out. It's like, no, you guys are trying to defend him. You guys need just to say he was wrong and he said incorrectly, and not trying to backpedal. And it's like, oh, it's almost the same, blah, 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 99%, 96% correct, accurate. But at the tail end, this video comes in where viewers can ask questions, right? And the viewer here is going to ask a question, and you could tell immediately Ruslan does not like the answer that's going to be given by Alex O'Connor. So we'll watch with that and jump into it.
Okay.
Anything you want to, any questions or any thoughts before we jump into the video?
No. I like the background story on this Ruslan guy because I have no idea who he is. I just know, I'm just somewhat familiar with the Alex O'Connor.
Yeah, pay attention the moment Connor gives his answer, his face, and what he says.
Like, I'm sure there's a different way someone can explain it, but again, the crux of the Christian faith is the resurrection of Jesus, and then subsequently what follows the resurrection of Jesus and the church that is planted and started. So that's fascinating. Do you let me see if I can hit some of these super chats.
Oh, I may have gone back a little too much.
Thank you for doing this, Alex. I appreciate you. Hopefully we do this someday in person.
So he's looking at the screen
here's an interesting one
questions.
from Deadpool. He said, Alex, if you had to join one Christian denomination, which do you believe has the most consistency according to the history of the church and scripture? This is where Alex will have to pick a jersey.
Mormonism, of course.
Oh my gosh!
Look at them; they're like mocking him.
Yeah,
but you see, Alex O'Connor serious.
We don't consider them Christians. Give me another one.
No, well, that's the interesting thing.
See, did you hear what he said?
Yeah,
they're not even Christian.
Yeah, pick another one.
Pick another one, right? So it's, to me, it's a little ironic, right? This guy is saying, "Hey, look, I would pick a religion that believes in God."
Yeah.
Right. And say, okay, all right, that's interesting. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with the LDS position. It would be the same as if he said, I believe in the Orthodox Church or the Roman Catholic Church. I would say that's a good thing. You're heading in the right direction. That's better than where you were before. But what do they say? They mock him at first. They laugh at him. They literally laugh at him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Any thoughts on that, or you want to jump back into it?
Just a little side note. I do find it funny that we have some very intelligent people in understanding the position of Christianity and the history, and to laugh like that. It's funny. It's almost like what you said. Like, you think we're all heading the direction, but then they said it's almost like you never turn to go to the right direction. It's still like they still think that's still incorrect. So I don't know. I just find that funny for very smart people, but it's, the world is interesting. That's all.
Well, and that's the thing. That's why God says to not trust in the arm of flesh. Sometimes we get a little too smart for our own good, right? That's the danger of, I don't know how to say it, but because education is a good thing, right? You have a degree, I have a degree, we have a lot of family and friends. We don't say that that's bad, but we do say it does have certain weaknesses if you aren't careful.
Yeah.
Right. And always to remember that the more you learn, the more you should realize the very little you know. Right. And how, quote unquote, facts many times aren't really facts. That's just people's assumptions. So yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting that he kind of mocks him. But then you look at Alex O'Connor, he first seemed a little surprised, but then he's kind of like, oh, okay. Looks like I have to defend why I'm saying what I'm saying. So quick here. Hey, Kingpin, Malo,
Hey,
welcome.
Malo, Kingpin.
It's just a religious discussion today at the Kava session. Kingpin, Malo. But yeah, let's jump back into it.
Thing is that they're sort of often not. I don't even know if they really like to consider themselves Christians as such. I think there's some really. I've been learning a lot about Mormonism. Do you know, by the way, who the first ever U.S. presidential candidate to be assassinated was?
He was a Mormon.
It was Joseph Smith.
Whoa.
Oh, he was a candidate. Joseph Smith was running for the.
Yeah,
That's
he ran for
interesting.
president.
Wow.
There's a lot of really interesting stuff about.
What do you feel
Mormonism
about?
and
What do you
history
feel
of
about
church.
Daniel's Dan McClellan's Mormonism?
Well, I don't know much about it because he doesn't seem to speak very publicly about it. I quite admire the way.
Who's that?
So,
I have no idea.
So Dan McClellan earlier, and I listened to this the episodes in earlier parts. He's like a historical Christian academic, right? And he's one of the guys that talks through like, oh, he thinks the Isaiah scroll is. I mean, it's in the 90%, right? There's the debate is between 93 to 99% accurate between the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Isaiah that we have today. And this Dan McClellan is an LDS guy.
Okay.
And so that's why he's asking him. And I didn't know that until he brought it up.
Okay.
And then it makes sense to me why he kept putting down Dan McClellan earlier by saying, oh, he's not really, that's not his specialty. It's blah, blah. And I was like, now that I heard that, I was like, oh, maybe you just don't like it because he's LDS.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so that's who Dan McClellan. So apparently he's LDS, and he's actually working with that Wes Huff guy, I think, to get a more accurate number on what percentage of the Isaiah scrolls match the canonized versions we have today. Another quick comment here from Facebook. Malakay Tuakimoana says, Maalah ifangatokowa, malo bisope.
Ovatu Bishop.
Ovatu. So very interesting, right? So he brings that up, and then listen to what Alex O'Connor's answer is to this LDS guy who's an academic, right? Because that's what Ruslan's asking him.
That he strictly segregates his personal convictions from his scholarly work, and I think that makes the scholarly work more trustworthy, especially because he admits that they run counter to each other.
Mm-hmm.
At least I think he's done that. Like I think he did that.
He did in our conversation. I wonder if that gets him in trouble and like up for any type of like church discipline.
Yeah, I wonder. I don't know, but I do admire Dan's scholarly approach. I think he's a quite careful and fair assessor of the Bible. I've got a lot to learn from him for sure. So I don't know anything about his.
And I think that's a very important thing, that there's a distinction between logical, academic, and philosophical approach to religion. And that's very different from a spiritual approach, right?
Okay.
Like you can make arguments on both levels. A logical observation, how does this apply? How does this make sense? How is it historically accurate? You can make that argument. But there's another argument that is spiritual, and you cannot. It's very difficult to convince people who don't have a lot of spiritual understanding, and they're coming from an academic to try and overpower them with just spiritual answers, because it won't make sense to them. It's like talking to a child, who's 4 years old, and you're trying to talk about complex mathematics. To the 3-year-old, all you're telling them is blah, blah, blah. That's what it's like to go to talk to someone like Alex O'Connor about spiritual things. He just doesn't have enough spiritual experience to understand some of these spiritual things. And so you have to build a little bridge between the spiritual and the logical and the philosophical to hopefully at some point make that transition. Because I believe at the end of the day, in order to grow with God, you have to cross that bridge. You're right. You can have logical and philosophical and historical things as secondary sources of your faith, but your primary source of faith has to be spiritual. And the challenge is, if you only bring the spiritual discussion or approach, it's much harder. It's not impossible, but it's much harder for other people who don't have that spiritual experience to make the connections, meaningful connections, to go themselves, to get their personal revelation, to get their answers.
Okay.
Any thoughts on that, Masi, or we want to go back?
Nope. Just I think I'm good so far.
10-4.
Mormonism, but I think Mormonism's a fascinating religion in many ways. A lot of people aren't aware of its history and also of a lot of its doctrines and theological ideas and its different idea about like what God is and all of this kind of stuff. And the history of persecution of Mormons in the United States is pretty amazing too. You know, like there's so much really interesting stuff. The extermination order of Missouri, where like people were told to just kill them. You know, like it's an unbelievable history. And of course, Joseph Smith dies in a shootout in prison. Like it's one of the most dramatic stories of the world.
I wouldn't say it was a shootout because one side had guns and the other didn't have guns. So it wasn't necessarily a shootout when one guy was in prison without guns and the other guys with guns came into the jail, not a prison, a jail, and shoot him. So I wouldn't call that a wild west shootout. Sounds like more like a massacre if I were to give my opinion.
Yeah, no, and like it's so funny when Alex O'Connor just talks about the history of, you know, it was okay for we were treated like you know, the pioneers were treated like, just like, let's just say when they were making the expand out west, when, you know, fighting against the Native Americans, the Mormons were just as, if you were to take away, you know, the fighting with the Native American, you were not going to be prosecuted or anything. The Mormons were just treated just as such. So I don't know many religious organizations that had been deemed as you can exterminate them other than the Mormons in American
take
history,
their property. Kill them and take their property.
Correct. So pretty crazy.
Yep.
World religion in the world. Of course, it remains the case that we have, because it's so new, we have better eyewitness testimony to
this is where it gets
Moroni and the plates than we do, unfortunately, to the resurrection of Jesus, it seems. But that was also a point that raised some eyebrows in my original video, which I found quite entertaining.
Yeah, Alex, let me ask you this, because I'm kind of, these questions are kind of all the same that I'm reading, and honestly, none of them they're super interesting.
Oh, see how he doesn't like the topic. He switched. Can you imagine that if someone came and made if this is a more modern day, we have more evidence for this than that, and then his response is, oh, let's move on. Okay, to me that says a lot. That says is, Ruslan, you're not necessarily curious for the truth. You just want to hear what you want to hear. That's why I've liked Alex O'Connor, because he seems genuine.
Yes,
in
good
his
intention.
position.
He's always got good intention. Yeah, and he's very smart.
Yeah,
in articulating his thoughts.
And so I thought that was interesting, that, you know, because that's one of his critiques about the Bible is like, we don't have first-hand accounts or witnesses. But what he does say is, well, the LDS church is pretty recent, so we have actually witnesses.
Yep.
Who have their name not only in the Book of Mormon, the 3 and the 8 witnesses, but others. And of the 11 witnesses who saw the Angel Moroni and the Book of Mormon, the golden plates, they never rescinded their witness, even when they fell away from the church and hated Joseph Smith. And that seems pretty reliable. And what does the Book of Mormon testify of? Jesus Christ. So if you can get people with firsthand testimony that this book is from God and that God testifies of Jesus, to me, that only strengthens the Bible and the resurrection. And not only does it strengthen the Bible, but it also says that the resurrection of Jesus was so real that he appeared in the Americas, which he says the biggest, like maybe it was good that I started a little bit earlier, the most important thing in Christianity is the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Correct. That's what
and
makes
now we have a book. Yeah, we have a book with firsthand eyewitnesses of its divine origin. And within this book of divine origin, it says Jesus resurrected and showed up in the Americas. I don't know, just some interesting things there.
Very nice. Very nice.
All right. So the next video we're going to jump into real quick is a video of
wait, quick question.
Go ahead, Marcy.
Quick question. Do you, and this is just a curious question here, in any parts of the Bible, which one is the closest to being maybe more accurate in its recordings, or are they all the same in each, like in the parts of the New Testament, Old Testament? Do you have it? I don't know. I'm just curious if you know if there are certain parts that are the most accurate.
It's not necessarily a question of accuracy, Masi, because we have the Greek transcripts that seem to be
Correct.
pretty reliable, that they're consistent. The challenge a lot of atheists have is they're like 70 to 100 years after Christ's death, right? And they're saying, man, a lot can happen be 70 to 100 years, right? And how reliable are these sources, right? And so that's me. Yes, that's the primary argument, which is why when he asked the question, who does he think has the most accurate scriptural record, and he would probably follow it, and he says from his mind, eyewitnesses recorded in recent history that has not changed, and these people died with it. The LDS Church seems to have that, which is him trying to be consistent with his critique. His critique of the Bible is no firsthand witness accounts, right?
Okay.
And even the ones that are pointed to as possible witness accounts, even academics and even religious people have pointed out, yeah, the Gospel of John or whatever may not have been written by John, right? Like, and then Paul's letters, there seems to be a lot of edits to Paul's letters, so it may not be Paul, but even then, Paul, who seems to be the most influential in like the Protestant, Paul was not there when Jesus died and resurrected. He had a vision after the fact, so he wasn't one of the original 12 apostles. So it kind of gets a little complicated, and that's the problem with having this very strict requirement for temporal knowledge. It's very difficult because time changes. We live in a fallen world. Everything is deteriorating. When you limit yourself to just temporal evidence, you find yourself in the predicament that Alex O'Connor is, right? This is the same thing we face with Polynesian history. If you just limit yourself only purely to academic studies and what can be proven through science, you miss out on a lot, because there's a lot of oral history, a lot of parts of understanding the culture that gives much more context to the history. That to me is true about religious faith. But hey, there's a question here. I don't quite understand it. Maybe you can understand it better, Masi, but this is from HOSS Sizzle. Can we agree that the disaster party wouldn't have the means to build the Salt Lake Temple? I don't know
Not too sure
what that means, HOSS, if you could maybe clarify on that.
Yeah, clarify that one, Sizzle.
We'll jump into this. So what happens is this next video, it just came out yesterday. But what it is there is a channel called Jubilee right here in this top right corner. And what they do is they bring people with different ideas, opposing ideas, and have them debate. This one was called One Atheist versus 25 Christians. And they do roundtables, they ask questions. And granted, Alex O'Connor doesn't know these people. He doesn't know that, certain people are of different faiths or whatever.
Yeah, different denominations.
Yes, but at the tail end, after they have like all these discussions for about an hour and a half, they give Alex O'Connor a chance to pick anyone that he's spoken to say, hey, this guy seemed a little interesting. Let him come, make a statement, and then you can challenge it, Alex, or have a discussion on it. And he picks an LDS guy, which is someone that you follow quite a bit, Masi.
Yeah,
Jacob Hansen. I watch him as well. Thoughtful Faith, I think is the name of his channel.
Yep.
So picks him to come, and then they have a conversation on that, and that's what we're going to react to.
Okay. Enthusiastic and philosophically minded as well. Why don't we bring you back?
So, my claim, which might bother some people in this circle, and this is why I thought maybe we could find a little bit of middle ground
here.
Like it. because I represent a form of Christianity that a lot of people don't even consider as Christian.
Uh-huh.
I'm a Latter-day Saint, also
Aha.
known as a Mormon.
Awesome.
And my claim is that the restored gospel, also known as Mormonism, provides a conception of God that is more rationally defensible than any other creedal Christian sect.
Okay. Oh, tell me.
I want to pause with that real quick, Masi, so we can kind of look at the claim.
Okay.
Right. So the claim is Mormonism, or the LDS, or the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, provides a conception of God, an understanding of the nature of God,
Okay.
that is more rationally defensible, meaning it's more logical. It makes
Okay.
more sense for us to comprehend than any other Christian sect. So that's
Okay.
his claim, right?
Okay.
And so they're going to get into it, and there's going to be questions back and forth. Any thoughts to add to that? Any questions or?
Nope. I'm good so far.
All right.
Conception of God that is more rationally defensible than any other creedal Christian sect.
Okay. Oh, tell me why. I must admit, I don't know very much about Mormon theology. I know you
So-
also don't like being called Mormons, right? So I don't quite know what term, what term to use.
We generally are known.
Latter-day Saints.
Latter-day Saints, the church, a member of the Church
LDS
of
theology,
Jesus
let's
Christ.
say.
Yes. Our theological claims, for example, the problem.
I have something funny to say about that.
What's
Okay.
up? What's up?
Oh, before I get into it, since because our last show, I didn't keep track of the comments, and they ran away from us because there were way too many comments. Hey, Mo says, "What's up, Tonga kids? What's up,
Doing
Mo?
good.
Welcome,
Doing good,
welcome." So this is what's interesting. He says, "Oh, I know you guys don't like to be called Mormons." I don't think we care. I don't think we we hate being called Mormons, right?
Yeah.
There's just a concern that if you focus too much on the term Mormon, that the accusations of other people that were not Christian
Correct.
sticks better, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
here's what's interesting. The prophet today, right? President
Yeah.
Nelson and Gordon B. Hinckley, one of the previous prophets, they didn't agree on this topic. Gordon B. Hinckley was fine with the term Mormon, and he's like, yeah, I'm fine being called Mormon.
Yeah.
But obviously, President Nelson didn't agree with it. So what's the first thing he does when he kind of there's a whole revamp, right?
Yes, he
and then a
changes
big
it. Yeah.
push. So to me, I thought that's kind of interesting, right? So just kind of, for those who are not LDS, who are listening and watching, is like, I put this as when someone calls me Samoan or Hawaiian, I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Well, no, it doesn't bother me. It's not a big deal. Samoan, Hawaiian, we're all the same people, right? It's all the same thing. It's still relatively accurate. I have Samoan blood, just,
Correct.
Fijian blood, Hawaiian, it's the same thing. That's how I view being called Mormon. No, I don't mind being called Mormon, but if they say, hey, what's the preferred way? Then I said, well, our prophet says we call ourselves members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But if you call me Mormon, I'm fine with it if you don't want to do the whole name of the church. So just wanted to throw that out there because some people, in my opinion, get a little overzealous about I don't want to say pronouns and stuff, but it's almost like the same thing. Someone says Mormon and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm traumatized. I'm a member of the church. Relax. People have been calling us Mormon since the beginning of the church. It's not a terrible thing. But just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know why, but that just stuck out to me.
No, that's interesting too, because it does provide an insight that not everyone, even though they're close, but there's some people, even when they reach those high places, when they like what you said, right? Gordon B. Hinckley thought it wasn't necessary to kind of do the whole change, but when he was prophet, right? Because there was maybe other things, but now that we have our current prophet Russell M. Nelson, now he said this is an important emphasis that he should emphasize. So it's just, so my question is to say to is it just depending on what people's own personal experience kind of thing, or what they feel like is important, or do you feel like sometimes it's a more spiritual inspiration that they need to change? That's my question to her. So do you think it was more, or is it more of a personal preference?
It's
or just what they own.
yeah.
Because I feel like, right? Because I feel like it could be whatever they say. It's just from their own personal experience of life, right? But then at the same time, you can always know, no, this is not a personal experience. This is probably a spiritual inspiration. That I feel like what he's saying is, you know what I mean, to
Yeah.
you
How do we
understand?
differentiate, right?
Yes, right. Because I mean, they all have their own personal experience. They all, and that's what when they ask a question, they'll answer that, or it could be a spiritual inspiration that's come to them to explain that we need to change that way. But
Yeah.
Corbin Hickman said it wasn't an important thing to do it back then. But is it important? Was it a person? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
No, that's
just
an
thinking out loud.
interesting thing. And this is actually, I don't know if this is tied to what you're thinking about, but I'm gonna just throw it out there and you can see if it's somewhat answering your question, Masi, right?
Okay.
And this, and don't mind me, guys. I'm just sometimes when I'm just chatting, I like to play with stuff. Hey, that could come across the very wrong way. Apologize, guys. Anyways, one of the big questions I used to have growing up was, and it's somewhat tied, I think, to your question. Where is our freedom of choice versus God's will? Right? Like our freedom of choice is our preferences, what we know, right? Kind of like what you're saying. It's like an individual thing.
Yeah.
But then there's also God's will, right? And then and I used to struggle with that quite a bit, actually. Because you're always like, man, God's will versus me. Hey, Slick Rick, I do see the questions. Once we get through this commentary here, we're gonna jump into some of those questions.
Okay.
Just so you know, Slick Rick, I don't want you to feel like we're ignoring you, but that's assuming that there's not a million more comments that come up. So I'll try and be quick. Then this is what I've come to the conclusion so far, Masi. It's both. It depends on your perception on the character and the power of God. Right? So if you believe that God is a God that is so great that he can leverage whatever your choices and preferences are to accomplish his will, that's how great he is, then all of a sudden the separation of quote unquote God's will and your will is not the important thing. What's important is you and God are on the same page and have a relationship with God, that God trusts you. Right? It's like having an amazing quarterback, right? Okay. And you have the play on the field that this is the play, you're supposed to run this route. But you have such a good connection with your quarterback that as you're running the route, you're looking at it and it's like, man, the route that I'm supposed to run that looks to me out of my personal preference is like, that's not going to work. Like there's 50 different defenders there. I'm going to run a different route because I think that's the right thing. And I'm trying to help my quarterback, right? By getting open. I believe God is such a great quarterback that he's like, yeah, you're going to run the route, but hey, Tua is just trying to do his best, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. Sometimes he's going to make a cut in a different direction and God can adjust for that. That's how good God is, right? That's how great God is. So to me, there's like a big path this wide. And as long as you stay inside that path, God can make it work. Your personal preference on whether to hug the left lane or the right lane, God's like, that's okay. I can work with that. We only have problems when you step outside of that.
Beyond the lane, yeah.
Beyond the lane. And so for me, it really wouldn't have made a difference to God because God's like, oh, Mormon, okay, I can make that work. Oh, hey, but President Nelson thinks it's a much greater thing to highlight the Savior's name. Oh, that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing, right? And so it's really, that's how I've tried to understand how God works with allowing us to have our free will and still be God and accomplish his goals. I don't know if that answers your question, Masi.
No, it does. No, it does. Because I've always just thought like, because when you're always interacting and just you really fall on your understanding, on your perception and how you were raised culturally and what you've experienced in your interpretation of what life should be. I feel like that's always the forefront, and I don't think it's every. And to me, is everything you say gonna be spiritually inspired? That's what I'm just trying to think, right? And I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
or like, because I'm just thinking of like even many prophets of old was it was only like certain times, right? They feel like they spiritually had to act on it, and this was spiritually inspired. It wasn't every interaction or every part of their experience of
Yeah.
being prophet that was everything they said was from
God.
spiritually inspired. Yes, that's all.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to understand what your thoughts are, because I've always, because to me, I just find that very difficult. Like, because I'm just thinking out loud to it, like there'll be some prophets that thinking spanking was okay. That's a
Yeah.
good thing to say. There's some prophets say no, maybe
No.
it's not. It's time out, right? And that's what I'm trying to understand. And I feel like where does that come from? It's their own personal cultural background of what they brought up that they would fall on, and then and then like what you said, then maybe the spiritual thing will meet up because you're in the same lane. But I'm just trying to understand these little
Yeah,
nuances.
it's
Because
complex. And
yes,
and
that's all.
and,
That's my
here
question.
I'm going to say something that is somewhat on the edge of my, whether you want to call it edge of my faith or edge of my thinking in the gospel,
Mm,
is two things. And this is kind of some of my criticisms of how Jacob, and even within the church, how our perception of God, right? Because this is really important. Life eternal is to know the nature of the one true God. So that's life eternal. The perception we have of God and the character of God, that's the whole point of religion. That's the
mm,
whole point of revelation, is to understand God as he really is, right?
mm,
And when we don't have a proper understanding of that, it's the water is much more fuzzy, right? Or muddy, and our vision is much more fuzzy. And I'm going to come back into saying this. Two things. When Abraham was worried about whether he would have posterity,
mm.
God tells Abraham, Abraham, if you die without having a child,
Yeah, yeah,
all my promises will still be kept.
because I am
Okay?
God. Yeah.
Because I'm God. Now,
Mm.
now just think of that. Just think of how that doesn't make sense to us. You're
Yes.
telling me that if Abraham died without having a son or a daughter, that he would still have descendants that would bless the whole earth, and they would be more
Mm,
than what's in the stars.
mm,
Okay, that doesn't make sense. How is that? Well, because God's God. He has a way. We
mm.
whenever we try to put God in a box and limit him, that seems to be one of the first flags to be very careful.
Mm.
Right? You said, I'm not saying you shouldn't have, because our brains right now are wired to put limits on things. Right?
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. There's a limit here. You can't. I'm not saying there's a reason why we have that, because you just don't want to go crazy, right? If you don't have limits, then the way we perceive the world just kind of
Goes crazy.
disintegrates. We
Yeah.
can't operate. But we need to be very careful in putting God into a box. So that's the first part. The second part is, now it makes sense what Jesus told the Jews. When the Jews were like, well, we're descendants of
Mm.
Abraham, and we're so important.
Correct.
And what does Jesus say? God can raise descendants to Abraham from these rocks. Right? So
Mm.
Jesus was basically saying, you think just because you were born that's what makes that the unique quality, that limits God, that God is now stuck with you? That's not why God is stuck with you. God could have made Adam died, not have children, and then he will take these rocks and make descendants
Mm.
of Abraham. What he was trying to tell the Jews is, no, the reason why you're connected to God is because Abraham made covenants with God. It is the covenant that makes things possible, because it ties, God is willingly tying himself to Abraham, saying, no matter what happens to you, Abraham, I'm going to make things the truth for you. right? And I'm going to make this claim, and it's kind of on the edge of my thinking right now. That's the invitation God is giving to humanity, to us as humans, is this. When you make a choice, let's say when you're standing in front of making a choice, Masi, right? Because we're talking about personal preference.
Yeah.
Let's say there's a million, billion, trillion choices in front of you. And God could make any of those choices work.
Mm.
Any of them, right? And he goes, Tua, Masi, here are my guidelines. Make a choice within these guidelines. And granted, there have been rare occasions where prophets have asked outside of the guidelines. And God says, all right, that wasn't my preference, but we'll make that work.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'll
make that work.
Fill the gap. Yeah.
So to me, the invitation from God in making covenants with him through the restored gospel is this. You have the opportunity for God to make your personal preferences, as long as they're righteous and don't go against the will of God, he can make that truth. He can make that truth. And that's one of the unique things that I think the gospel teaches is God can work with your choices if you have a relationship with him and if you're willing to work with him. The only time he says, I'm not going to work with you, is when you rebel against him and give him the middle finger and say, get out of here. Right? Then he's like, oh, okay. So you want to act like Lucifer and rebel against me and say, I'm nobody, I shouldn't be respected. You're on your own. And when you're on your own, nothing works for you.
No,
if that
that's
makes
perfect.
sense, Masi.
No, it does. No, it does. And that's all. I was just a question. That was just a curious question. I was thinking that makes sense that if you have the righteous intention and righteous communication with true intent with God, he can make it work. He can make it work. No, I got it.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important, just kind of overlying theme, because the overall theme for this series is the creation.
Yeah.
That is a very important concept to understand when you look at Adam and Eve's choices. Right? When you look at Adam and Eve's choices and the context of what happened and how we got to where we are, an understanding of that principle, in my opinion, allows you to explore the creation account and the fall in a much greater detail. But we'll come back to that. Let's get back to some of the questions real quick. Quick answer here for Mo. So today is a Mormon religion show. Mo, today is Sabbath day here in the US. So we're going to have a religious one. And fortunately or unfortunately for our viewers, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, we partake of the LDS church. So a great part of that is going to be influenced by that. Mo also says, I will call you Mamonga. No problem. I'm not going to go and cry. If you call me Mamonga, Mo, it's fine.
As long as it's Mamonga, not Momonga.
yes. Not to be confused with that, right?
Mo.
Yeah. And Maile Mamani Tech, Malo, he says, Malo Kautama, Malo, thank you. Here's a question from Slick Rick. There's three of them. Maybe we'll touch all three of them. Okay. Do you believe that Christianity was based on the Greek prophet philosophy?
I have no idea to this question, too.
Okay. And he says, by the way, what's up, Masi and Tua?
Hey, what's up, Slick Rick?
My initial response to that, Slick Rick, is this. The Greeks get access to Christianity, and this comes back to our conversation earlier with like Alex O'Connor, right? The Greeks were heavy into philosophy, right? And here's Christianity with a new way of thinking, a new idea that they never had. And so they tried to build bridges between philosophy and Christianity to try and help them make a connection to understand each other, right? And after you build that bridge, at some point you have to cross from pure philosophy into faith. And as you do so, that doesn't mean you have to neglect philosophy. Philosophy has a lot of advantages. You can't make that, You can't make that your primary source, because God is a God of the unknown, and he has to reveal himself to you. And he only reveals himself to you as you express faith. For whatever there's many ways we can get into why that could be the requirement, but it seems to be relatively clear that God requires faith. So I think when Christianity comes, or religion comes to the Greeks, right? And he mentions, Sleek Rick here says, some of the Greek prophets, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, make observations of reality, kind of like what Alex O'Connor's doing, right?
Yeah.
They looked at the world, they tried to understand it, they tried to organize it, ask questions, and then they tried to make the marriages between the philosophy and the religion, and then try to make that understanding. Slick Rick says, I believe that the Bible was hijacked, and that's when Protestant of Reformation began. That is very possible, Slick Rick, and that is from the LDS position. This is why one of our articles of faith is we believe in the Bible as long as it's translated correctly. Right?
And didn't we touch on it too, that we think that a lot of the discrepancies of describing God and some of the input it different, like man like just the man-made stuff into the Bible was like during the time of Deuteronomy.
Yes.
We kind of touched about that, especially that Deuteronomy seems to be a lot of input of man-made stuff,
ideas,
and made it very difficult to really grasp and understand God, kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I'll just throw that in there.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the danger. I mean, see, and it's necessary but dangerous at the same time to make that bridge, right? Because you could make that bridge, but then, and I see this a lot today, this is why a lot of academics have a challenge with religion, because they take the academic or the scientific or the philosophical, whatever starting point, source of knowledge, and the faith, and when they make the bridge, this is why the Savior says you cannot serve two masters, right? Either faith or whatever the second thing is going to be at the top. And if you do not make sure that faith is the driving factor of your relationship with God, then these ideas could, whether you want to call it hijack or seep into the doctrine and the faith and overcome the faith perspective. Okay. So, looks like we did a decent enough job. Malo, Slick Rick, appreciate the questions. Clyde Moore, welcome back. Religion is the hardware, philosophy is the software. Malo etaulava kautama. I somewhat understand what you're trying to say, Clyde Moore, but before I kind of throw my 2 cents in, Masi, any thoughts to Clyde Moore's position here?
Nope. I'm just like, I have no comment onto that. Especially, when we talk about religion stuff, I'm more of just kind of observe and just add little inputs, or maybe just ask a curious question to it. But you can go ahead and just add your thoughts.
Yeah.
What you think of Clyde Moore's question?
I agree with the concept that Clyde Moore is sharing here, but I just do a couple minor adjustments. Right? Religion is the hardware. I would agree with that. That gives the infrastructure, right? For you to do what? What's the point of the infrastructure? When you build a bridge, the point of the bridge is to get over some kind of obstacle, right? So religion, or I would say the church, the true church, but all churches are good. But the intent of the church is to give you the infrastructure. Infrastructure to do what? To make covenants and to receive revelation. Because it's not enough to just get over the obstacle. Is what's the purpose and the meaning of getting over the obstacle? What are we trying to achieve on the other side? Right? And let's use the example that mortality is one side, death and the spirit world on the other side. right? The bridge is the religion or the church that connects those two realms. And it's not enough just to die and go to the other side, right? That's why I say the church provides the infrastructure to navigate and go to the other side. But what's the purpose? If you can build the covenants and get the revelation to understand what we're trying to achieve on earth, then as you cross the bridge, you're maximizing the purpose on why you're on earth. And then when you get to the other side, you can maximize what work needs to be done on the other side. I'm not a believer we die and then we go to heaven, sit on clouds, and just, for me, drink Code Red Mountain Dew every day, right?
Yeah.
Some people would be drinking margaritas on the other side or whatever it is, hang out on the beach. Getting across is not enough. It is the purpose and how we maximize the experiences on the mortal side so that we can execute work on the spiritual side. I don't know if that makes sense, Mussy, of my answer, but that's
I'm good
also
with
my
that.
response to Clyde Moore.
Good with that.
All right. I'm actually somewhat shocked that people were talking here because I know a lot of these people may not be LDS. So, hey, I appreciate it. So we're going to come back here to Alex O'Connor because we do want to get to the creation account day 2 here real quick, but let's jump into it.
Problem of evil. Okay, so the way that we address it. So the problem really, so far as I can tell, that you have isn't so much with suffering, right? Because suffering.
Yahweh. I have to stop because of Slick Rick. Oh, Yahweh. Yahweh.
What do we call it? We call it the Jack Mormons?
Yeah. No. We call it the Special Forces. This is the guy who goes behind enemy lines.
Oh,
Slick
I
Rick,
like
you
that.
don't know it. You're just Delta Force. You're out there
Undercover.
scouting. You're out over there
agent.
scouting.
Maria.
You eventually come back with all Putin and Kim Jong-un's secrets. You're gonna come back and help us. My bad, Slick Rick. I'm not trying to gaslight you. I just thought that was hilarious.
That's cool.
Oh, that cracked me up, man. I couldn't help myself. My bad. We'll come back to the problem of evil, right? And this is a very important question because this is one of the biggest things that holds people up on God. Why does evil exist?
Suffering. Why does suffering
Yes.
exist?
Suffering could be something that is justifiable, right?
Yeah, in principle, it's sort of the amount of suffering, the depth of suffering.
Absolutely. So the issue really is injustice. It's
not injustice. It's suffering, and particularly suffering of non-human animals.
Okay, and fair enough. So with the concept of injustice, the Latter-day Saint conception of God is that God actually, his purpose is to make us become as he is.
Yes. Does that include animals as well?
Animals are part of the created order that will be redeemed along with the rest of the created order.
Okay, so what does suffering do for them?
Suffering is part of the inherent nature of the world as a fallen world, okay?
Even for animals?
Yes, even for animals.
Whose fault is that?
Let me break
Sorry,
it
I'm
down.
throwing a lot of questions.
Yeah, let me break it down like this.
Sure.
So if I have a child and I want my child to grow up to become like me, my child needs to go out of my house.
Yep.
He needs to go into the lone and dreary world.
Oh,
Commercial time.
Joe Biden economy. hopefully under Uncle Donald, we might have the wealth that Uncle Donald has been talking about.
The golden age.
The golden age, the great American golden age, may lead to the golden age of the Polynesian Eyes podcast that will pay for the paid version of YouTube.
We're relying on you. We're relying on you in the land of the free. New Zealand, we're still waiting for our golden age here.
Right now, New Zealand is just waiting for cheaper gas. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
Oh man. Let me okay. Now that the commercial is over, we can come back.
Okay.
If that is the case, that means that there's going to be some level of separation between me and him. He's in the world of injustice. It's a world that is unfair.
Why is that world unjust and unfair? Because I understand what you're saying. You're in this analogy, you want.
See, and this is where I think though that LDS idea, that's like the general LDS idea, it's a separation from general Christianity. But we'll see here that separation of the father and the child, it's just giving that example is good, but it's not enough.
What would you say then? What do you think would be a better example?
The question is, what is going to cause the separation? Right? He's using our current condition as if that was the reason why separation was necessary.
Okay.
And this is where understanding the creation is critical. God, when Adam and the cause of the separation is because Adam and Eve ate of the fruit, right? The question now becomes, why did God allow that to happen?
You're saying, why did God allow the serpent or Satan inside the garden? Okay.
Because he could have stopped it.
Yeah.
Right? He could have stopped it, but why didn't he stop it? Right? And there has to be some discussion there. And he wouldn't force, let me put it this way. That's a Western mindset. That the only way for the child to grow is to move away. What's a Polynesian mindset with this?
Yeah.
You can live with me.
Yeah. It's a communal. You whatever you married to that family adds value to our family. So we're building a stronger community kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
You're seeing, and most Tongans always see that, right? You're a clan of a certain clan, or you're building, and that's why strategic marriages is still a big deal in Tonga. They want you, when you marry off to thing, you're getting that support and that kind of contribution from that clan, because you guys are essentially one, right?
Yes. And this is why I challenge like Jacob and some of these guys. They need to peel back and go a few layers back. Why is the separation necessary? Right? And why did he allow that necessity to, why did that the conditions of allowing that necessity to happen unfold the way it unfolded? Because I'm a believer, there's a million ways to that could have happened, right? Like Adam and Eve, just like the Polynesian model. Dude, you can live with me, right? We have to interact a little differently. You can't just go do whatever you want. No, when we live together, the engagement's different. What's required of me, what's required of you is a little different, as if we were separated and you were all on doing your own thing. See, they jumped to the conclusion that the only way to accomplish this was separation. I don't buy that, right? Just like I don't buy the only way that God could allow us to progress or live with him was for Adam and Eve to partake of the fruit. That's not the interesting question to me. The interesting question to me is, like we talked about earlier, there could have been a million different options. Well, why did God pick that one option to happen? That's the more important question to me. And Jacob doesn't ask that question. He jumps straight into, well, he has to leave. And then and then Alex O'Connor's asking him what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Why? Why is that necessary? Right? Because you say he's God, right? He can do anything. So why did he make that happen? And I think that's a very fair question. And I think that the scriptures and the restored gospel and the knowledge that we have can answer that. But even within the church, we suffer from groupthink. We've been told to think a certain way, and then we just think that way because, oh, that's been the sufficient answer for the last 200 years, however old the church is. We're coming up on 100, 200 years, whatever it is, 150. That is now insufficient to answer the questions of today, right? Like technology and information and our questions are getting more sophisticated, that we cannot just rely. This is why I believe the brethren are really restructuring how the church operates. Right now, it is family taught church supported. When for decades and decades and decades, it's always been the church is the primary teacher. The family always, it may not have been intended that way, but that's how it was run. That the family, the teaching within the family was always kind of felt like secondary. The primary was, hey, algelotu, go to church. That's where you're going to learn everything you need to learn. And the church, the brethren are now switching it and saying, no. The bridge is important. Like Slick Rick was saying, the hardware is important, but it's not enough. The software of how and why and the faith and the purpose, well, you find that in the family and you develop that in the family. And so the church is restructuring now where they're saying family taught, church supported, which to me is, and I appreciate Clyde Moore's metaphor there, because that's what it is. The church supports is that bridge, but the meaning, the purpose, the revelation, the relationship, and the understanding of God's nature, the family builds that better than having your bishop try to be the one that teaches you that, or your elders quorum. Those are good helps, but that's not the most efficient way. And how do we know that's not the most efficient way? Because if God wanted it to be the church, he would have created churches, not families. When God created this thing and sent Adam and Eve, he said, go in families. Church, we can add churches to it, but the primary unit of growth and experience is the family. I don't know if that answers that makes sense, but that's kind of the comment that I have there.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense, especially when you talk about the separation, right? And that's why I was just interested on, Jacob is gonna gone to that way of separating in order to understand kind of God or to be like God. But we have a different kind of view. You don't have to separate. It's just God's nature. He can do whatever he wants. It's just trying to understand why he chose that, right?
Yes.
Why he chose that.
And here's a good example just to keep in context. Before the fall, separation wasn't required. After the fall, separation is required. But Jacob is starting from the after the fall condition, not the before the fall. And it's that what caused that change, right? That's where Alex is right now. That's where his doubt and question is. We just jumped right into the separation, but how? Why? When God can do all things, right?
Good point.
Want your child to become like you. And what that's going to involve is encountering suffering, developing as a person, getting thicker skin. But the only reason that you want that for your child is because they're going to live in a world where they're going to have to encounter that, and you want them to be better at dealing with that, right? If you were given the opportunity to give your child a life that was separate from you, where they went about and did their business, but there wasn't that kind of suffering, and you chose the one in which there was suffering just for the sake of it, I think that would be problematic.
Well, it's not that I chose to put them in that world. See, this is a difference in Latter-day Saint theology.
Sure, that's what I'm interested in.
In Latter-day Saint theology, there is a pre-existence. And human beings, knowing the unjust nature of reality, have the choice.
Oh, they choose to.
They choose to enter into the mortal state.
You notice they keep going to all the other. Don't like anything Jacob is saying. Okay. Earlier in this video, Jacob was sitting at the table talking with Alex, and there's 20 people there, and if 11 people put up a flag that they don't like you, you get removed. And Jacob was in there earlier, and he didn't even get halfway through his allotted time, and people voted him out.
Yeah, so he didn't have it.
Because they all know he's LDS, and they all know they don't agree with. Like we said, a lot of Christians don't think we're Christian. Yeah, we're the redheaded stepchild of Christianity. I think the Catholics are slightly above us, but we're definitely
to pass through. The way to look at it is there's this realm of injustice where anything can happen. I can go out tomorrow, my kid can get cancer, all these things can happen. And the idea is we say, but if you're willing to pass through the realm of injustice, this is a necessary condition to reach your divine potential.
How come? Why is it necessary?
This is another thing about Latter-day Saint theology that's different. Like, for instance, God cannot create a square circle.
Why does that apply here? I mean, why can't he do that?
Because God cannot bring you to your divine potential because of the nature of the laws of reality.
Okay, but like, why not? Because you're just sort of restating that he can't do it. I want to know why.
I know what I'm saying is that there are laws that even God is bound by.
See,
So which laws are relevant here?
that's my problem.
Mm.
Alex is saying, why? Why is this separate? Why is this suffering necessary? Right? And then our immediate response, and this is like 99.999%. I actually haven't heard another LDS person take the position that I take. So maybe I'm the black sheep in the LDS world. But the 99.9% of the LDS world would say, and a lot of Christians say this too. It's not just the LDS. A lot of the Christians, like Alex O'Connor was talking to some other Christians in different faiths, and they say the same thing. Well, God has to follow this pattern, or God has to follow these laws. But the scriptures also say God can do whatever he wants. God literally says in the scriptures, there is nothing in my heart that I will to do that I will do it. Just like Abraham. Abraham can die, not have children, but I can still make him have endless descendants with physical bodies. Right? And so to me, that is where we start the weakness of how the LDS people present the plan of salvation. Is we do great, like the typical Christian. They kind of have a firewall that they can't cover, and we can cover it for a little bit, but then we also run into another firewall, which is what Alex is saying. Well, I understand you say you have to go out and suffer, but why? God can do all things. Right? And then what do? The only way that we can express it right now through Jacob and them's thinking, oh, God is limited in a box. And I'm like, woo, like I said, once you start saying God is limited to a box, I kind of get a little like, do we really want to go there when we also believe our God can do all things? I'm not saying you can't explain why. I'm just saying maybe that's the easy button, to just say God has to follow this because he can't do any other option. You know, rather than digging in to understand, no. God can do anything. Why is God choosing to do it this way? And try to understand why he's choosing to do this way versus other ways, which is what Alex is kind of digging at. Any thoughts?
So my question would be like, how would you answer, and how do you think Jacob should have started in, like, why do you think suffering and stuff still happens? And
yes,
you know,
and
how would you explain that? Like, how would you kind of explain to Alex why suffering and evil things do exist in the world today, and it's God?
Yes. So the shortest way I can answer this is this. Because Adam and Eve disobeyed God directly, they put themselves in a position that the only way to get back to God was through pain and suffering. And it was up to them. We need to change the thinking of going out. Right? When Adam and Eve chose to eat the fruit, they went out. And then God is saying, you can be stuck there. I'm a fair God. I didn't force you out there. You chose to go out there. I literally told you, if you eat of the forbidden fruit, you will be cast out. Or, not necessarily cast out, but he says you'll surely die. And I take the interpretation that that's not physical death, that's spiritual death, meaning you're going to be separated from me. I'm not going to be able to talk to you because you violated our agreement. And my justice says we cannot be together. But then he talks to Adam and Eve, and Adam and Eve, what do they want to do? They want to come back to God. And God says, okay, I'm going to provide you a savior. I'm going to provide you a way, but the only way you can come back is to go through this suffering.
Correct.
And so that is where I'm saying it. You got to change the perspective. Jacob is talking like going out is the only way to progress. And I'm saying, no. Coming back in is the only way to progress. And to come back to God, you have to go through the suffering. You have to go through all this stuff. And then God says, but I will help you. I will give you a savior. I will give you a way, because the truth is, guess what? It's impossible for you to come back to me.
Yeah.
Unless
I'll give you the
help
Holy
you.
Ghost. I'll give you the Holy Spirit. You know,
So
baptism. So yeah.
so that's how I would switch the thinking on
Okay.
it. And this is heavily, like I said, this is heavily influenced by my personal study of the creation and the fall and the how and why we got there. And so, yeah.
No, because I was going to say, because Jacob is speaking like how many LDS people are taught that they had to break God's commandment, right? Because you have to, because it's right. They just said to multiply and replenish the earth was part of that commandment. So they had to break it. And that's why they had to go to the fallen world. That's where
Exactly.
that's where Jacob's thinking is coming from, right?
Yes.
You have to be separated.
Yes. When in reality, see, this is all the paradox behind it. When in reality, what did God say? I can make children by just talking to rocks.
Yeah.
You don't have to disobey me to have children. Right? And then I'll mention this very quickly because I think we'll talk about it in the future. But for any of the LDS people who may be listening to us and be like, man, Tua's crazy, I do make a distinction between eating of the fruit and the fall. A lot of people say the eating of the fruit is the fall. I say eating of the fruit is the action that required the fall to happen. But we can kind of do a deeper dive into that when we get further along the creation account.
Okay.
Oh man, I didn't realize we would get up to about an hour on this, but a lot of great questions, Mussy, and from the viewers.
Yeah, like which laws is
Like the law of non-contradiction, for instance.
Explain to me how the law of non-contradiction binds God to not create a world where there's no suffering?
Because that relationship with God must be freely chosen, and God cannot force me. Because there is the question: why doesn't God just make us all
Okay,
happy?
but that's
all
a
the time
separate question,
forever?
because God could make a world in which there's no suffering, which
See?
you're still
I disagree.
in which you're still free to choose whether or not to follow Him.
I would say that is a logical contradiction.
Okay.
That's what the Garden of Eden was, is the world that Alex is describing. Because they lived in the world where there's no suffering, no pain.
Yeah. No.
And they had free will to choose.
Animals are peaceful. They weren't eating other animals.
They weren't dying.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the world that Alex is describing already existed, but we fell from that. And actually, even after they ate of the fruit, that world could have somewhat maintained itself. But in order to come back to God, you had to go through the fallen world that we're in now.
Okay, so maybe you can tell me why. Because right now what you're telling me is that it's illogical on the level of creating a square circle to create a system that a person can voluntarily choose to sort of exit the heavenly realm and go into in order to do whatever they need to do to get to God's ultimate
Not to
potential.
get to God, to become as He is.
Sure, to fulfill their full potential, that has to involve not just suffering, but the kind of suffering that we see on planet Earth. I'm asking why that's logically necessary.
A totally unjust world, okay? Because it is by passing through this realm that we have the experience of injustice that allows us to know what injustice is.
But why do we need to know what injustice is?
Because how else can you come to be like God? Kind of like the Adam and Eve story. There's the fruit of the tree of knowledge and good and evil.
I would make a slight adjustment to that. Right?
What's that?
You have to go to the lowest kingdom. You have to give up everything in order to get everything. You can't, no risk it, no biscuit, right? When Adam and Eve ate of the fruit, I make the comment for non-LDS people, they went from a celestial to a terrestrial world, right? But they needed to, this is like a reverse logical conclusion. To go up is to go down, right? And so in order to go back up to a celestial world, you cannot go straight up to the celestial world from a terrestrial world. You actually have to go down and you have to give up everything. Like Jesus says you have to give everything up. You have to release everything. And it's only when you give up everything and choose God that you can come back to the celestial realm. So it's kind of like, you know what? I can either stay with 80% of my chips and be stuck at 80%, or you know what, I gotta risk everything in order to have a chance to get to 100%. Oh yeah, wait, got a good little comment here.
Okay.
Water Bears, Malo, welcome. Kolob is in Inglewood, California. Marie, kaya yung fight tao fan na Kolob.
What's up, Water Bears?
Malo, Water Bears, welcome to the Sabbath day kava session. Anyways, yeah, we'll come back here and try and finish this video here and then get to our creation account.
It's justice. How do you define justice?
Off the top of my head, I would say that justice is getting what you deserve.
Yeah, right. Okay. And so the problem is that, like, you can imagine a situation in which there was nothing wrong, nothing bad, nothing evil, and therefore no need for this rectifying force of justice. It's a little.
No.
We say justice is a good thing, but justice is a good thing insofar.
Can you know?
Hold on. Justice is a good thing insofar as it overcomes injustice. That's what it's there for. In the same way that chemotherapy is a good thing because it tries to overcome cancer. If I said that I was going to create cancer so that we could have the good of chemotherapy, and you said, why would you do that? And I said, because there's no way for us to achieve the good of chemotherapy without creating cancer. You'd look at me like I'd lost my mind.
No, it's like saying, this is the better analogy. It's like saying to my son, the only way that you can become the way I am is to go out into that world where anything could happen and to persevere.
Okay, so I still have a qualm with this, but for the sake of time, I want to ask you about animals. Do animals consent to go into this?
The animal kingdom is part of the fallen world. They are part of the fallen order.
Do they feel pain?
I don't know. That's more of a good question. I don't know necessarily where.
What's your confidence level? Like, if I started strangling a dog in front of you, would you stop me?
Yeah, I think that I have an obligation to prevent the death of living creatures.
Not death. No, I'm not going to kill it. I'm going to.
Well, even if
Deadpool
that's
style,
even
keep it
worse.
alive, just so it can suffer more.
Yeah,
Will you
sure.
stop me from doing that?
Yeah.
Like,
Those
why?
are good questions. man. This
because
is
I
a
believe
good-
that God wants us to protect the created order.
Okay, so
and to
it's-
create goodness, light, and truth.
So
in
would
the
that be
world.
similar to, like, you know, me stepping on a plant or something? You're just like, hey, don't do that, man. It's the created
No,
order.
you could
Or do you
say
think
that-
it's because they're suffering?
I think it is probably because they're suffering, but I don't understand that suffering in terms of the way that humans suffer.
Okay, because you said that the reason why it's not so much of a problem for humans to enter the Vale of Tears and have to suffer is because they consent to do so before they're born. If
Well-
animals don't do that, then I don't think that their suffering is justified on the same grounds.
Well, let me turn this around, because while I think that you bring up some objections there, my claim is that we have a better capacity to handle this than the creedal Christian model.
Sure. Okay. So,
And so would you agree with my claim that we have a better model than creedal Christianity?
I don't know, because I don't know enough, because we've only been speaking for 10 minutes. There are probably things that it deals with.
I
better
mean,
and things that-
this guy's a pretty bright guy, right?
Yeah.
Like his
That's
answers
some
to me
good-
are really clever. He's like,
Yeah.
well, you know, Jacob's a pretty smart guy too. And he's
He
kind of
is,
like,
yeah.
oh, we get these great answers. And he's like, well, I've only been talking to you for 10 minutes. How could I possibly answer that question?
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty fair.
Hmm.
Pretty fair. All right, let's go right here. Celestial Realmers can go down and visit the heathens. Maria Water Bears, and Water Bear says, please come down and visit me too at Masi. Oh, yeah. Way. Water Bears, at least you're in the telestial world. Masi and I are in the outer darkness. You need to come down to us. Bring us something, Water Bears.
Yeah.
Bring us a vaini taco down to the
Right.
outer darkness.
Maria.
it deals with words.
Ay.
For example, you know, I've spoken a ton on my show about the Gnostic cosmology, which I think does a lot to do away with problems like the problem of evil and the weird sort of seeming immateriality of Jesus in some passages and stuff. But there's a lot of problems with it too. There's a ton of problems, such as like
Yeah.
God's providence and the nature of why the demiurge is created. All of these ideas are oftentimes, I think, created because they better account for certain things over others. Don't think that's necessarily the case with Mormonism, of course. But yeah, I'm sure in some cases it does better, in some cases it does worse. In this case, I don't think it does anything more to explain the suffering of animals.
Your problem with the suffering of animals is that it's unjust.
No, it's not.
Then
It's
why do
not.
you? Why, then what? Suffering
that
is
it's un-
it's
it's that-
suffering. If suffering ultimately is redeemed, let's say the animals on the other side, for all they suffer, they get the best possible animal future that you could.
To me, my response to Alex O'Connor,
Yeah.
not all suffering is the same.
Mm.
Okay. And not all
Oh,
not all living life forms are the same, right? Like,
Okay.
for example, I don't go to jail for 50 years if I kill a dog.
Hmm.
Right? I might get a fine, I might get some things. And I said, even logical human beings know there's a difference between a dog and a human, and there's a difference between a dog and grass. I will go out and weeds. I will go out. We all know that plants are living life forms.
Yeah.
I'll go out there, man, and I will spray chemicals on the weeds that I don't like. Don't even think twice about it. Cockroaches, I kill it. Don't even think twice about it. But a cockroach and a dog are not the same level. And a big part of it is relationship of beings. The relationship of a human with a blade of grass is not the same as the relationship of a human and their dog or any other dog. We as a society have realized dogs are very helpful. They do a lot of good things. Therefore, going and strangling a dog, do I feel personally obligated to stop someone from strangling a dog? Not necessarily, but you know what I might do? If I wanted to teach, if I walked out there and Alex O'Connell was strangling a dog, and I go, Alex, why are you strangling a dog? Oh, because I'm stronger than it and I just like doing it. You know how a Polynesian's response to that is? Let me strangle you, Alex, for a little bit and see if you like it. Do you like it? If you don't like it, then leave the dog alone. Like it's that. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. Mushy, any thoughts on that?
Quick question to it, and this is the thing, right? Do some people's relationship with dog is not a typical
Western?
Yes, because for example, I was in Tonga now, and I was at our family property, and the neighbors, they strangled a dog and put it in the umu and ate it, right? So like I was telling Sarah was she's like she said, man, that's crazy.
Sad.
They grabbed the sack, they strangled made it, put it on top of the dog's head, strangled it
What a terrible way to kill it.
I see. And these were
Just
just
smack
young.
it on the head. Give it a better death.
I've seen it that way, right? And I've just seen it. Oh, this is a new way, and I'm just sitting there watching. These are, and I can tell these were like teenager boys. There was 2 of them. Maybe they just want to do something different, but they killed the dog that way and put it in the umu, right? So, did I go and stop? No, I just knew they were doing it because I just know Tongans will eat horse or eat different, right? Or eat a dog.
Horse for an American is like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's terrible.
Yeah. So I'm just
eat
thinking
steak all day.
Yes, so I'm just thinking, is it because, see, this is the thing with that example with animals. Are we just perceiving animals because we're in America in a different way,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
If you use that same example, that's what Alex was using with that example, because not everyone sees animals that way.
The same
in a
way.
Different part,
Yes.
different part of the country or different part of the world.
The world.
They're you could say Tonga is very Christian, but our perception of animals are. Some
Different.
people see them as useful. Some people see them as all right.
Annoyance.
You've done your annoyance, or even like I said, population control. Right?
Yeah.
They don't go and fix them or anything. They say, you know what? We can't take care of all of them. We have to get rid of them.
And that's the thing. That's what I was saying earlier. A Polynesian's perspective of fixing Alex O'Connor strangling a dog.
Yeah.
If a Polynesian were to see that, like I said, they wouldn't feel obligated to stop him, just like you didn't feel obligated, because we recognize that there's differences between life forms, but at the same time, Alex would be like, "Oh, Tongans don't care." But if there was a Tongan who cared and said, "You know what? You're not doing this to kill it, to eat it, to come. You're just being cruel, Alex. If you're doing that in a Polynesian island, better be careful because someone might teach you a lesson by just strangling you, not to kill you." Right? But they'll be strangling and said, "Hey, Alex, do you like it? Does this make you feel good? Yeah. Yeah. Do you think the dog likes it? Don't do it."
Yeah.
Because if you're being cruel to the dog simply because you have dominance over it, then you shouldn't have a problem if I exercise the same measure of justice to you.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And then Alex, hopefully that will give Alex, I mean, in this theory, I know Alex wouldn't do that, but in this example of doing that, then Alex will be like, "Oh, maybe I can connect with the dog now. Maybe that's not a good thing." Right? And maybe he'll learn. I don't know. But yeah, this is that example is very powerful in a Western perspective. In other perspectives, in other cultures, right? Like you might ask that to a Tongan, and the Tongan might like, "No, I don't feel obligated to stop you. In fact, are we going to eat it? Is that why we're strangling it? Or whatever." Anyways, Yeah, we'll cover
ever
that.
imagine.
Why?
And the animals
Yeah.
get there and they go, "This is great. It was all worth it."
Yeah, then the question is
then
why-
it would be worth
then
it. So it's the injustice of
the
it.
question is, why aren't they just given that without the suffering first? I can understand why that wouldn't happen with humans for whatever. Again, I want to clarify. I still have qualms with your idea, but let me just grant it for a moment. I can understand why you need to do that with humans before they get the nice reward at the end. But why the animals? Why cause them to suffer?
Human beings will suffer as well unjustly. It's
I'm not
just the
talking about
nature of
justice.
an unjust
The
world.
suffering of animals, I think, is unexpected if a good God is overseeing.
But it's not a
the world.
problem if ultimately they are compensated.
Well, I
for
think
it.
it still is a problem because you don't just get to inflict suffering and then compensate people and think that that's okay. Have you heard of the Bullingdon Club?
My response to that relatively quickly would be, when you understand that Adam was given dominion and control over animals, that's why he was given the power to name them, that is the lessons learned that Adam has to answer for, and we have to answer for. Just like every leader, right? A leader's choices has impact on those below them. And that is one of the challenge. Because of the fall, because of Adam's choices, everything in that creation that was handed over to Adam is impacted by that. And that is just the nature of having someone as a leader over you and the choices that they made.
Is a club
No, if I have to inflict suffering on here,
wait a second. Let me give you this example. Let me give you this example. There's an infamous club, a private members club at Oxford University called the Bullingdon Club. They're a bunch of like Etonites, posh kids who used to go around. They'd go to restaurants. They were incredibly rich. They would host a dinner and then they would trash the place. They'd flip over tables. They'd smash things. They'd cover the walls and everything. It was absolutely devastating, just horrible behavior. And then when the owner came up and said, "What the hell have you done?" they just paid them off. They said, "Hey, have a bunch of money." And not only that, they paid them way more than the repairs are worth. So they could get away with it because if anything, they've done those people a favor. No, it's still terrible, awful behavior because even if you've compensated someone for it, if you've caused them suffering, which by the way, still hasn't been explained
real quick,
why that suffering exists.
That's a fair
It
point.
doesn't seem like it's worth it.
Let me do this.
Or if it's not worth it, it doesn't seem like it's
It
justifiable.
can be worth it though. For instance, a dog that's getting a shot has no idea what's going on. He's just thinking, this hurts and is so terrible. And the thing is if it ultimately saves its life, it's worth it.
Yeah, but imagine
so
if you
there
had the
is a
opportunity-
compensatory reward for the suffering that's there, everything can be redeemed.
understand what
and
you're
in
saying.
your view, is life even worth it? Because if life is mostly suffering, even for the animals, then isn't the logical conclusion to end this project altogether?
That's a separate question. But if you had the opportunity to not have that dog need the shot, and you gave them the shot anyway, you created the need for the shot, and then gave them the shot and caused them to suffer,
But
then
in
you didn't need to
LDS
give them the need for it in the first
cosmology,
place.
God doesn't.
That would be wrong.
God does not create the conditions that are where the shot is necessary.
That's
You're
what we need to
correct,
solve.
and you're correct on creedal Christianity. It does, and that's the biggest flaw with it. By the way, I want to give you. That's just. Hey,
thanks.
Alex. It's been
So
great.
there
to
we
meet you.
go. Not
well.
bad. A very
See you later.
interesting conversation.
Jacob himself said that a lot of the people here might not even consider him to be a Christian because he's a Latter-day Saint. And I think the best thing that speaking to somebody like him does is reminding you that not all Christians are the same. There's not some uniform Christian worldview. Everybody who comes up is going to have a different opinion. And having a Latter-day Saint in there who has a totally different theology to other Christian denominations, let's say, I think is a good reminder of that.
Overall, it was a really great experience. If I were to give my totally honest opinion, I think it was that Alex O'Connor was able to kind of destroy a lot of creedal Christianity because of the weaknesses in the creedal Christian position. And as a Latter-day Saint, I couldn't help but feel like I think we have things that can help solve a lot of the problems that Alex has with creedal Christianity.
I think I probably disagree.
Pause there.
Yep.
Any thoughts,
Yep, and
Mussy?
No, and I was gonna say they probably will do a future episode because I don't know if they had done one yet or not, but I'm just saying that's a good conversation because I know Alex O'Connor has done so many podcasts and kind of debates with various Christian denomination, organizations. So yeah, I don't know. That's just my thoughts, but it was good. It was good. It was good back and forth. Enjoyed it.
So that took much longer than I anticipated, but the whole concept here was just to kind of bring in ideas of different perspectives on trying to understand why the creation and understanding the creation is so important, right? The way you understand or perceive the creation and the fall of Adam and Eve has direct impact on how you view the world, how you view the gospel, how you view your faith and everything else. And that's why we have a series on the creation account. to kind of give some more perspective and have more conversations on that, because we believe more conversations on that will lead to more ideas and hopefully more light and truth. And we accept our bias, obviously, from the Latter-day Saint perspective, but we throw that out there. People want to challenge it, ask questions, say it's garbage, whatever it is, but we are at least bringing something to the table for discussion. Mahalo, appreciate it as well. I follow up with Masi. Appreciate all the viewers and the listeners. Like you said, Masi, pleasantly surprised, right? Sometimes we know some of our viewers, we agree on history and culture and stuff. They don't always agree with our spiritual or religious positions. But it's, as we all know, and as we say, this is the beauty of the Kava experience, the Kava circle experience. This is why, Polynesians have been, in my opinion, living the podcast concept for thousands of years, because the Kava bowl and the Kava gathering is where politics, religion, social, academic things were discussed by our ancestors for thousands of years. And those things are important because it allows us to understand the world around us. It helps us understand how we fit in the world and gives us the opportunity to ask questions and to grow mentally, spiritually, emotionally, academically, politically, literally across the board. But we thank everyone for joining us. Yahweh, Moe is definitely pushing the Tuitonga Empire forever. The red wave. The red wave.
Boy.
So, Malo Moy. But with that being said, as always, we invite everyone, stay curious, be bold, and ask those questions, and don't be afraid to seek after the truth, right? I'm not always saying the truth is not always fun, right? Sometimes it's great to be like, oh yeah, this idea has some good points, but the truth can also be painful, and that's a good thing, because maybe you need to learn and grow somewhere, whether it's with the family, with your church, with your community, or in your personal life. But those are good things. So keep asking the questions, be bold, and until next time, peace.
Peace. Oh.